Hello and welcome to the Kayden Show, today's best country mix. And joining me right here today is Neil Anthony. Neil, how are you?
Good morning, Kayden. Yes, I'm fine, thanks, from Sydney, Australia.
Fantastic. Good morning for you. Good evening for me. It all works out. We're all over the world. That is so good to hear that you're good. So why don't you start by telling everyone a little bit about you and how you got started in music?
Well, I started out as a teenager, got very excited about playing in bands and took up the guitar and singing. And I guess it was in the rock scene and worked my way up the treadmill in the rock music business and ended up in a band. We were doing quite well in Australia. We supported different big acts, including a band that you might have heard of called In Excess.
I think I've heard of it, yes.
They were, I think they made it to number one in America with some of their songs, and
Mhm.
but I found that I wasn't really achieving what I wanted to with my singing. So I went back and studied singing more formally, and then developed into more of a solo artist, singing and songwriting, joining in bands along the way over the years. But these last 20 years, I've been basically a solo artist, and I do my recordings. I've trained myself, did some courses as a sound audio engineer, so I can now take it from the pencil on the paper right through to the finished product.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. How hard is it? Is it something hard that you got to do? I'm sure it takes a while, but kind of walk us through that.
Well, as you say, it's the hard. It's
Hmm.
98% perspiration and
Hmm.
2% inspiration.
Right.
Writing the song and putting the music together is one small part in the chain, because actually most of the work is in the production process of
Hmm.
recording your various soundtracks and mixing and mastering. But I find it very satisfying. I get lost in it. I sit down at the studio desk at maybe a 2 or 3 o'clock, and suddenly it's 7 or 8 o'clock.
Yes, it definitely can consume a lot of time. You look over the time and you're like, how the heck is it this time already? Like,
Loving what you're doing.
that's really true. It's it's definitely a lot of effort and it takes a lot of time. You can be in the studio for, I don't know, 6 hours or 9 hours, and if you enjoy it, it's clear that the time passes really fast. So.
Yes, yeah, I get a lot of satisfaction, and then you come back a couple of days later and listen to what you've done, and
Hmm.
that's when you get that feeling. Okay, is it in the right slot, or do we
Right.
go back to square one?
And sometimes that happens. Maybe you gotta, go back to square one. And that's okay.
Yep,
For
yep.
sure. So why don't you start by telling everyone a little bit also about any new singles, upcoming projects that you got, Neil?
Well, I've gone from doing CDs. I released several CDs, and I'm now moving more into the digital domain and
Hmm.
have my music up on the various websites, Spotify, etc. And putting singles out is a different concept, I guess. But I recently put out a single called Going Out in a Box, which was a sort of a return to blues and roots for me. And it's a bit of a rocky throwback song, but
Hmm.
there's a sort of a comic twist in the concept of going out in a box.
Yes, it is for sure. So if you had the opportunity to do a collaboration with any singer out there, Neil, who would you choose and why?
Oh, wow. Um, I have to admit that my musical tastes change almost like the seasons. So there's quite a lot of favorites out there. But look, I guess at the end of the day, it'd have to be Keith Urban.
Hmm.
Being a fellow Aussie who came up through the ranks in Australia, and I saw him when he was starting off and getting knocked back.
Hmm.
And so, yes, he's such a great songwriter and musician that, yeah, he would be my first choice.
Definitely. Keith Urban, And for the longest time, and I had these interviews all the time, somebody actually told me a while back that he started in Australia, and I actually didn't know that until that point on, and I was like, really, really cool.
Yes, we have a thing in Australia called Tamworth, a town in Australia called
Okay.
Tamworth, which is
Hmm.
sort of Nashville in Australia. And that's where I first heard of Keith when he was performing in various shows at our Tamworth Festival. And as I say, it wasn't an instant overnight success. It was
Right.
like everybody else. He had to do the hard yards.
Some people just don't really get what goes into it.
Well, exactly. The hours and hours
Hmm.
that are put in, particularly with someone like Keith, who's such a brilliant
Hmm.
guitar player, the practice and work that he does to keep that standard up, it's amazing. And I just admire him for that.
What do you like doing outside of music, Neil? Do you have any hobbies or anything like that?
Well, I'm a doer. I like doing things. So when I get involved in things, I'm not generally not an audience member. I'm generally a participant.
Hmm.
And so I just get involved in whatever is happening and be part of the action.
There you go. So you pretty much will do anything as long as you're not an audience member.
No, I
Oh,
don't
that's
like
funny.
being a passenger. I'm happy to pick up a saw and do some carpentry or get out on the dance floor. Whatever's going on, I'm pretty much a participant.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Nia, where do you see yourself in the next couple of years, and where do you see your music in the next couple of years?
Well, I'm sort of at that point where I'm consolidating. I've been there and done that with a lot of things, and so
Hmm.
I'm now looking at going through the archives. I've got many songs that I haven't recorded yet. Some
Hmm.
of them I'll probably never record, but I'm sifting through and looking for things that I can work on and sort of add to my songwriting something a bit different to what I've done before. So I'm in the studio. I also now do a lot of concerts for seniors
Hmm. Oh,
in
awesome.
clubs, community groups. I'm not out there on the road anymore. I'm based in Sydney, and there are
Hmm.
plenty of venues close by where I can sing. And I did a gig last Friday. I did one on Tuesday. And I just sort of keep it ticking over at a level that I enjoy, knowing that I'm not at the beginning. I'm more towards the twilight end.
Hmm. Certainly, certainly. Do you have any advice to those who might want to start singing or performing or anything like that, but doesn't really know how to get their foot in the door?
Well, I think the big advice is to learn your craft. If you can find someone that can teach you something you don't know, that's where to go. I did a lot of time singing lessons, guitar lessons, music theory, and I look back on that as the most valuable time that I spend. The other thing I'd say is to get out on the floor and do it, because even now when I do a gig, I come away and I think, I could have done that a little bit better, or maybe I should have bounced off that person in the audience a bit better. So getting out there and doing it is another piece of advice I'd suggest to people. Just sling your guitar over and get in front of the audience.
That's awesome. Neil, do you have a message to those who might be listening to, or watching this?
Enjoy your music. I think that music, when I started out in the music industry, it was before the internet took over, and live music was just that was the place to be. And I think we've lost a little bit of that now. I think people
Mm,
listen to their music with headphones and they go to a gig and then they think, well, why wasn't I going to gigs? So yeah, I would say enjoy your music and get out and listen to live music.
where can people find you on social media if they want to keep up with what you're doing, Neil?
Of course, I've got a website, Neil Anthony, that's Neil, neilanthony.com.au. I've got, I don't know, nearly 30 YouTubes of various things that I've done. And then, of course, I'm on Spotify, Amazon, and all the other digital channels.
Fantastic. Neil, is there anything that I forgot to mention that you would like to mention today?
No, not really. It's been fantastic talking to you, Kayden. You're just such a relaxed interviewer. It's great.
Thank
I'm
you so
sure we could.
much.
I'm sure we could talk on for hours.
I'm sure we could. But I would like to thank Neil Anthony for coming on the Hidden Gordon Show, today's best country mix. We sure do appreciate your time so much, Neil.
Thank you for having me.